And 3, 2, 1, 0. We are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. How can a price make or break your brand? 3 tips how to keep the control. And today with me, I have Robin Daniels, so Ryan Reynolds of B2B. I've met Robin first time, and I have a surprise here. I think 2.5 years ago at SaaSist in Malmö, and I actually have a SaaSist T-shirt today with
All
me
right.
that I got from the conference when we've met. Robin is working with Zensai AI, but Robin, maybe I will leave the floor to you. If you could introduce yourself to our audience, that would be fantastic.
Of course. No, it's good to see you again, Chris. Yeah, I mean, we met 2.5 years ago. SASE is one of my favorite events, I would say, in all of tech. It's just like felt more like a rock festival than anything else. But yeah, so I'm Robin Daniels, and I'm the Chief Business Officer at Zensai, where I run product and marketing and kind of go to market. And I've spent over 25 years of my life in technology, really in SaaS. When I was 21, I bought a one-way ticket from Copenhagen, Denmark, where I was born, to California. I didn't have a job or a place to stay. I didn't know anybody. I'd never been, but I had a dream of making it in Silicon Valley because I'm a nerd and I wanted to be with all the nerds of the world. And over that period of time, not everything I did turned into gold, as it doesn't do in life, But luckily, I was on some pretty incredible early journeys with Salesforce, with Box, with LinkedIn. I was at Matterport. I was at WeWork. Some pretty iconic companies, and also a bunch you probably haven't heard of. And during that time, I was usually in the marketing team. I've been a CMO a few times, taking some companies public. And I think a lot about kind of brand and storytelling and business evolution and pricing and how do you get people to fall in love with who you are and what you do. That's kind of what I am. But now I'm the Chief Business Officer at Zensai, where I'm really focused on all things go to market.
Amazing. Thanks for that. And so we have Copenhagen, we had California. I am dialing in from Wrocław, Poland. Some of the people are telling it that this is a Silicon Valley of Central Eastern Europe. So we have
That's good branding right there.
of course, I made it. I made it up, actually. No, kidding. So, dear audience, let us know where you're dialing from. Let us know what countries, what cities you are based in. And before we jump right into the topic of today, we have a bit of a ceremony at the very beginning. It's already, I think, a tradition, we can tell, because it's already 10 plus of the webinars around pricing. And we always ask first question, and the first question, like we always ask the first question, that's obvious, but the first question is always the same. So I would like you to imagine the words not a year from now, not 2 years from now, but 10 years from now. And how do you envision the big changes in technology? How do you think that technology, SaaS product ecosystem will evolve 10 years from today? And of course, audience, if you have any comments, let us know as well.
That's with everything changing so fast, Chris. That's a hard one to answer.
But everyone was in your shoes, right? Everyone from let's make let's
do you think will we finally have flying cars? I think we've been promised flying cars since the 50s, so maybe in 10 years, you never know.
Maybe it's gonna be at this, tube. How do you call it? Like the tube from Elon Musk. I don't remember.
Oh yeah. Like the Boring Company, but that's more like for, I don't know. I'm not tunneling or something. Who knows? Maybe the Teslas will start flying one day.
I will make it a bit leading. So let's make it around SaaS is dead, right? Type of this statement. Do you think that traditional product companies that are based on the subscription model will be still present 10 years from today, or not really?
I'll give you my take on it, and I'd love to hear yours, Chris. I mean, you're also a leading thinker in this space. I think we're moving from the traditionally you've had kind of like systems of record where you've stored a lot of things, and that I think morphed in the last 15, 20 years into kind of more systems of engagement. Suddenly you had that schism. you could either be in system of engagement or system of record, or maybe both. Some were both, and I think they did that very well. In the future, I think we'll have much more systems of intelligence, which would be like these systems that will be speaking to each other, working together behind the scenes, constantly optimizing how we think about lots of different things. It could be anything from marketing to sales to how we think about finances, building products, and so on. But I think we'll have much more systems of intelligence that will underline a lot of our infrastructure, our processes, the way we do things in a company. And I think you're already starting to see that play out a little bit. But right now you have it siloed, but so you don't really have a system yet. I think in the future, maybe it's before 10 years, but you're going to have this underlying kind of brain in your company, I think, that everybody can tap into, that's constantly helping you optimize whatever it is that you're focused on optimizing.
So, for example, I want more leads, right? You type that in, and you have many different products that can chip in, which is like quite it like and funny as it gets, I'm betting on the same. What is the most interesting for me, how those companies will monetize
Yeah,
their products,
of
right? On
course.
the output, or how they are getting remunerated. But
Yeah.
let's see. And most likely, I'm not sure, because we can, of course, go full circle to good, better, best per user.
Right,
I hope
right.
not, but this is also the avenue that I can see. Nevertheless, I think this is what I'm hearing a lot, and thanks for that. Okay, so then I think we have it all, and let's jump into our main topic of today, which is like price and brand, right?
Mm,
So we tend to say at Value Ships that your price should be extract from the value that you are giving, but also your price is a reference of the value that you are giving, right? So it's a two-way stream. How
absolutely.
important is pricing in branding for you? Do you believe in what we are saying, or it's irrelevant and you should first focus on the brand, then on price itself?
No, I think they're definitely interlinked. So it's a great question. I think a question that most entrepreneurs don't spend enough time thinking about. I think there's basically three ways that you can win in a market. You can have the best product, which is obvious. You're never going to survive if you don't have a good product. You can have the best community, and we've seen some companies that just like have great communities of people who love their products. Maybe even if those products are average, but they've figured out a way to stoke the community, and so word of mouth is high, NPS is high, and people just want to be part of this thing. That's the second way. And the third way is, I think you can win a market by having the best business model, which a lot of times is about price. And we've seen that, I think, time and again. So and of course, the best companies of all, they think about all three. I mean, like one of them alone is defensible for a time, but if you can combine all three of them together, I think you have something that's really, then you can move from just being a feature, a product level kind of company into maybe a category leading company, or maybe even creating that movement that you want to. So for example, I used to work at Salesforce, right, in the early days, and Salesforce, we had very heavy competition from Oracle and SAP, and Siebel and Microsoft in the CRM space, and we had no brand really. We were a startup company, and so. And from a feature perspective, we couldn't really compete, honestly. I mean, like, yeah, you could get into a feature war, check, we got this, and check, you got that. So we always said we want to be a different kind of company. We're going to reinvent the way that go to market happens, the way that we engage with customers, and the story we tell. Because now we take it for granted, but back then it was revolutionary. Back then it was moving from client server to what was called cloud computing, or SaaS now, right? And the whole model behind it was around, we are in this together. I mean, the customer and us as a vendor. You can use as much as you want. You can scale up or down as you need to. If you don't like something, you don't have to use it. You can, if you don't like use some licenses, you can cancel them, but you can also scale up instantly, right? You don't have to talk to somebody first. So you can scale up or down, and we're in this together. We only win as a company, Salesforce, if you actually use the product and you love it. So we're in this together. So it allowed us to go out into the market and tell a very different story versus, again, Microsoft or SAP, Oracle, who's all about just selling you the big deal, and then they don't really care if you use it or not, because now it just sits there on the shelf. And it was such a great example of, we couldn't compete on the playing field that they had set, so we had to go change the playing field. And for us, that was about pricing. So the pricing, of course, in a in a SaaS model is very different, right? It wasn't just here's, we're going to sell you a $500,000 deal. It's a per user per month and so on. So price became a huge advantage. And it allowed us, when we would go in and talk to companies, to say, suddenly they realize, oh, you're different companies to do business with. You really care about our success. You care about whether or not we use your product. You care about, our feedback and all that stuff. It allowed us to just tell a different story that ultimately allowed us to win and create the category for the market itself, of course, which they now dominate, and everyone kind of uses that model, right? But my point stands that I think you can win a market in one of those three ways. And Salesforce, their wedge into the market was not the product, because they couldn't really claim credibly they had the best product at that point in time. Now I think they can, maybe, but at that point it was around, we're a different kind of business to work with. Our price is different, our model is different, and we're in this together.
And it's important, what is super interesting here is that I think it was like, tell me, 15, 20 years ago when this happened. And I think that it was a pivotal moment back then. And I have the feeling that right now, with all the business models discussion, we are exactly in the same moment, but for AI products. But I have like a little challenge here for you, because
Sure.
while I fully agree with what you said on the free principles that you can use, but I have this feeling that, product, of course, still super important, but not as important as it used to be like 2-3 years ago, because it's much easier to catch up with product features. What's your stand on that? What do you think?
Well, that's why I agree. I think each of these could become a moat. So the other nuance in this here is, I think you can win also by being first, best, or only. Those are kind of the three words roughly I use around it when I'm trying to come into a company or coach a company on how to think about it. And so you can win a market by being first, best, or only. And even those advantages only last so long, because it's very easy. And now in this last 5 years, it's become much easier for other companies to build something that matches you. So your advantage maybe used to be 5 or 10 years. Now it's maybe a year or two, right? So your competitive moat can't just be your product anymore, because it's very easy to go find something else. That's why I think your community, your brand, your pricing can also be competitive moats that maybe can be harder to penetrate as well, because product absolutely is. But the other nuance I would say is, this is also why I'm always talking about how you move from selling a feature to a product to a category to a movement, because the revenue potential is higher as you move up that stack, and the loyalty becomes much higher as well. If you're only competing on features with other companies, the moment something better comes along, you'll switch, because oftentimes the thing that comes along is about the same, but maybe even cheaper, right? To your point, right? So it's the same features, but cheaper. But if you feel like you're part of something that's a little bit bigger, you're part of this movement, this category, and you can't imagine a world where this product doesn't exist, then your loyalty is much higher. Even if something better comes along, the likelihood of you switching is very low. Like my iPhone, I've had my iPhone for a long time, right? You could argue yes or no, is this the best? Is the Android better? Blah, blah, blah. I'm so locked into this because it's I can't imagine my life without it, because I use it all the time, right? And the same with other companies who have ascended to this level. I think in the consumer space, you got Uber and Airbnb as two companies who've managed to do that. In the B2B space, you got Salesforce. You probably have something like a Snowflake, and others, maybe Atlassian. So you have some examples in kind of both, but they have managed to like create such love for the brand that even if something better comes along, people stay with it. So for example, in the CRM space, Salesforce had the lead for a long time, and as a product, it's hard to argue that they have the best product. I think today, many people would say it's bloated, it's too big, blah, blah, blah. But you're locked in. I mean, like, so there's a little bit of like, you're part of this. It's part of how you run your company. It's part of how you do outreach. It's like, so switching costs are very high, right? Because it's so integrated into the way that you think about how you either live or work. So yes, so product to your, it's a long way of answering this. So yes, the product, the differentiation has become much less obviously over time, and it continues to be. That's why when I think about companies, and if the only thing they have that's different is a couple of features, then I don't think they're going to stand a chance, right? Because that can be eroded. Think about OpenAI, probably the prime example of our time. There's a lot of debate constantly back and forth. Is Gemini better? Is Anthropic better? Is OpenAI? honestly, it's hard to know as a user. But what I do know is they blitz scale their brand and community. So when somebody thinks about AI, they think of OpenAI, they think of ChatGPT, right? And that has become a competitive advantage, not the features, but their brand.
It's a brand of Chat GPT, like it was,
Yeah.
Adidas as a shoe or a Jeep as a big car, right? Like we are
That's
not
right.
saying a
That's right.
big, yeah.
What are you seeing, Chris? So I mean, you study this and monitor. What are you seeing yourself?
So one point that one comment on what you have said, for me, what is super interesting when you are mentioning the Salesforce journey, that Salesforce disrupted the market, but by lowering the entry barrier, but then they kept being successful by increasing the exit barrier, right? So I
Yes.
think this is like quite often interesting, maybe obvious, but when you were saying that, I had this thought that this is a very nice and I think well executed strategy. So for me, why when inviting you and when I was super envious about your position, about your job, and why this is super important nowadays is that it's hard to catch up. Like it's easier to catch up when it comes to products. It
Mm-hmm.
is a bit harder to catch up when it comes to pricing, because your product needs to allow for that. You need to be credible with your pricing. You need to know how to extract the value and how to communicate the value. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not that hard. But you can't really catch up when it comes to branding, no? And to marketing, it's because
Mm-hmm.
it just takes time and it's an incremental effort. So
Mm-hmm.
my next question for you, and this is how I currently see the market. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, when you ask me, I think that the most successful companies will be those who will be able to do what Salesforce has done, so decrease the barrier of entry, and then not maybe increase the barrier of exit, because I think churn as a word and as a concept will not be long for us. Use it with us.
Yeah.
Usage will be the new churn. So I think that the ones who will be able to enable their clients to use as much as possible, those will be the companies who will be the most successful. But still being within the marketing, broad marketing price is a part of marketing concept. I wanted to ask you, maybe for some of our people who are listening to us, when it's a good time to start your branding initiatives, your branding, maybe team, where is a good time to hire someone for building a brand. What do you think from your experience?
That's a loaded question, day one, but let me explain why. Let me explain why. So
Pricing is
basically,
also day one. So we'll share
yeah.
something.
but 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 pricing. The reason also, let me just answer there's two parts of this question. The pricing part of it, I think, is, and I'm always oftentimes challenging founders, to rethink their pricing model. Like I said, you can win by having a best business model, pricing model, distribution model, and so on. And I challenge always the founders that I work with to rethink it, but it's very hard to do because there's only so many permutations or variations you can do. But I do think it becomes a competitive advantage. But I also think, don't just do what everybody else has done. Think deeply about this. How do you deliver the most value to your customers in a way that's easy for them to get onboarded and for you to scale? So that's not the first thing. The second thing on the brand. So the reason why startups are so hard and why 95% of them fail is because you're usually going into a market where you're competing on a battlefield that other vendors have already set. So you're already on the defensive. You're coming into a situation where you're being compared this feature against this feature against, and like you're always on the defensive, and you're competing against somebody who has a much bigger brand than you, more money than you, maybe probably more customers that they can point to, and so on. So it's very hard. And so you're competing in that battlefield. So you, as a startup, you have two options. You can either compete in the battlefield that others have set, or you try to create a new battlefield, which is called category creation. And the reason why startups are so hard is because the truth is you have to do both. you have to, of course, compete where the customers are, because they have a mental model of, I'm looking for an HR system, I'm looking for a CRM system, and so on. But if you, let's say I'm looking for a CRM system, then you're coming up against HubSpot and Salesforce and Dynamics and so on. Or you try to change the narrative into something new, that the old way of CRM is dead, and you like try to like change it. But category creation is not something you do in a week or month or quarter. It takes usually years, maybe even a decade or so to do so. And that's why startups are so hard, because you're either competing kind of like in a way that handicaps you, or you're trying to create a new way of doing things. And so you have to do both. But branding has to start from day one, because ultimately you have three ways of getting customers as a startup company. You can either pay for people's attention by using digital and performance marketing, showing up in Google and
Expensive.
Facebook and so on. Yeah, it's very expensive, and most startups can't afford it. And the quality oftentimes is hit or miss, right? You're going to get a lot of shitty leads that way, and a lot of people who are not really interested and so on. Okay, that's number one. Number two is, you can try to put out a different story that's so different and elegant and fun and interesting that people raise their hand themselves and go, I want to learn more about this company. I'm going to go to your website. Of course, much higher conversion, much higher quality, but it's not as data driven, and it's not as predictable as the digital marketing side of it. But that's a lot about, you're starting to go into brand building territory there, because you're trying to tell a different story than maybe what's out there, or point to something that's really shitty. And then the third way is, you can invest in what I would call brand building community marketing, where you try to get people to fall in love with who you are and your story by showing up and doing non-scalable things, doing small dinners, going to events. Like I met you at Sassius, and you told me about your company, and that's how you create your community around your company, right? So you're doing non-scalable things because you're showing up. You have to travel, you have to speak to people one-on-one and so on. Great things. And it hit off, and you and I becoming friends and doing this thing now, right? But it's a non-scalable thing. It's not as easy as getting in front of 1,000 people on Google, but the quality is much higher. And the reason, so the quality is the highest by far if you're leaning into your community and brand building efforts and your storytelling. The quality is low when it comes to, I think, your performance in digital, but it works faster and it's more data driven, right? So that's why, as a company, as a CEO, as a head of marketing, the truth is you have to do all three. And the reason why is because they work in different timelines. You can't just rely on your community efforts, like going to events, because it takes too long to kind of build. So you also have to get business in the moment. So you kind of have to like figure out when to do all three. But coming back to the question, when should you start brand building? You start at day one, because the reason why you don't want to look back 2 years from now, and when you've started like really building your company, and be like, shit, we wasted 2 years by not focusing on, because it takes a really long time to build a brand. You have only very rare cases where it was happened kind of super quickly, like the open AIs of the world and so on. But that's the exception. Most companies take years and years and years to build a brand. So you have to start right away. And then we can talk about, how do you do it? Well, there's storytelling, there's the founder-led brand, having a point of view and so on. The key ingredient, I think, for building a great brand nowadays is one simple thing: courage. You have to have courage to tell a different story. You have to have courage to try new things. You have to have courage to be both, of course, liked, but also disliked for what you're saying right out there. Trying to build a brand by kind of doing what everybody else is doing is a recipe for disaster. So it requires founders, CEOs, heads of marketing to have a lot of courage, because you have to kind of try a lot of things. A lot of it probably won't work or won't be that great, but that's okay. At least you're trying. And some of it will work, and some of it will end up hitting your ICP, and you'll scale, and people fall in love with who you are. Ultimately, the definition of, I think, of building a brand is, you're building something that people fall in love with. And love is like a strong word, but like when you think about the brands that you love, Nike or your Apple or whatever it is, like there's a sense of love for the brand and what they do, right? And so ultimately you're trying to do it, but it's just because they stand for something, they mean something to you. That's what brand building is all about. But you start on day one.
There is a very two points here. So the brand that I love a lot, it's like John Deere. I'm not sure if you know the word.
You know what's funny? Actually, you say that. I live, I split my time between Denmark and the U.S. In the U.S., I live in Milwaukee, where John Deere is from.
So for everyone that was looking for the technology recommendations, you can Google John Deere. It's a very far from technology company, but maybe some will argue on that. But more on the content front, I would say that you need to balance from short term, mid term, and long term ROI, right? And the problem with, or maybe the challenge that is around branding, especially in the era of fast fashion technology, is that
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just takes time, right? And if you
This takes.
think about this, I mean, it's frequently hard to say if you're even going into the right direction,
It's so true.
because the ROI can be long enough that you
Uh,
don't even know, right?
yeah,
And we've been on the market for what, 4 years, 4 years and a half right now, and we still promise ourselves that this incremental value or incremental effects of brand building will come at some point, and we
yeah,
see that they're coming, bits and
yeah.
pieces, but
Mhm.
it takes not like it takes courage, but also consistency.
But this is also
So
why one of the things I recommend to founders that they do is you set aside like 70 to 80% of your budget on things that are predictable and data driven. And then you set aside 20, 30% on things that are more around brand, where you're making experiments, investing in new ways of telling your story, events, and so on. Because there are things that, to your point, requires also faith, honestly, because you won't know. You'll start knowing it in your gut. Oh, people are talking about us. People are recommending us to their friends. You can start feeling it, but it's very hard to measure it. So if you only go by the data, then you'll basically spend all your money on kind of digital marketing because it's the easiest thing to measure. But oftentimes the lowest quality, lowest conversion thing. And again, if you only do that, you'll look back 2, 3, 5 years from now and regret not having the courage to like lean into your brand because nobody has fallen in love with your story. But let me ask you a question real quick. John Deere, for those of you who don't know, they like do all the farming equipment and so on, that you see all over. Why do you love John Deere so much? It's a very
because
like
I've
left field
heard this
thing.
one story, I've heard this like beyond, like I really like the colors, I really like the deer and like all these things, but I've heard once, and I don't even know if it's true story, but
Mm,
then I did a bit of a research, and I think that it is possible that it happened, is that there was a farmer who had a John Deere, and
mhm,
middle of the high season for him, he was using it, and somehow it collapsed. So he called the customer success, as we call them,
mhm,
and he called the customer success and tell, hey, my machine is not working. I'm in the middle of the work. If I don't finish it this week, I'm like, my business is more or less not done, but will have
mm,
a challenging times. So what I've heard, they said, okay, please give us a moment. We'll make sure that we can fix it. So what I've heard, like rumor has it, is that that day there was a chopper going to his field with a mechanic who, like, a helicopter, right? Like
yeah,
he
yeah.
came to his field, the guy just fixed it 1 hour, and like he flew back in a heli, right? So I was like, come on, that's a
Wow.
and John Deere stands with the promise of delivering, having the best
Mhm,
quality. You can
mhm,
count on John Deere always, right? So, and I think, oh my God, they're really living to the promise, because
mhm,
I remember from my studies, branding classes is, brand is
mhm,
a promise. And this is like, I was
mhm.
19 when I've heard that for the first time. And this so anchored in the back of my head that I
Uh-huh.
thought that this is like where you can really see that this brand is living to its promise. So I think that's the story. Then I became a fan. Maybe, one day people are dreaming of, Lamborghini or Ferrari. I'll get myself a John Deere, which is like twice of
I
the price of
absolutely.
Ferrari. But yeah.
But I love it. I love this story for so many reasons. It's about a brand that goes above and beyond. It made an impact on you, and they have values that they stand by. They want to make their customers. But also, what's so interesting about this story is that story you just told does not show up in a CRM system. How are you going to measure that in any way, right? But you love it. You're telling people about it. That's what a good brand is all about. That's a perfect example of why brand building matters, right? It's like now many people on this webinar suddenly have probably heard the words John Deere for the first time, and they'll probably go Google it. Right? It's like that is what a brand is all about.
for everyone who has joined in the last 2 minutes, this is not a farming webinar. We are still at how can a price make or break your brand? 3 tips for to keep control. And we are rather a tech enthusiast than farming enthusiast. So nonetheless, going back to initial topic. So I think we can both, and one thing, right? So first takeaway that is very tangible for this webinar for our audience is about the rule of thumb that you're using 70 to 80% on marketing wise on the channels that are predictable and scalable for you, 20% for experimentation. By the way, we're using very similar framework when it comes to price experiments and price testing that you can allow yourself to I don't want to say burn, I would rather say invest 20% of your pricing potential in order to get your pricing right through tests. The other things should be data/research driven. So I think this is very tangible, and I would really follow this advice. But trying to marry those two words, right? So while creating a brand, how important is the price? Because for you and the business model itself, because I have a lot of founders coming up to me saying, hey, we want to be premium, right? And we want to have a premium value. We might not have those features, but definitely we don't want to be the cheapest on the market, right? So while they think about brand building, in the back of their head, they have a price. How important it is for you, and any risks/advantages that you can see while building your pricing and branding strategy hand in hand?
Let's just get the headline out of the way and say, yes, it's supremely important for how you build your company and your brand. And it's also why it's a very nuanced question, which is why you have to partner, I think, with somebody like you at Value Ships, because it's so hard to give a blanket answer. But I would say there's a couple of things to consider, I think. Are you optimizing for reach or revenue? I think it's a good question to ask yourself. Coming into, for example, Zensai, we're in a market that's very, very competitive. At the high end, we compete with some very big players, and there's some mid-level players that we compete with, and some lower end ones. And so I'm not just optimizing for price, I'm also optimizing for reach. So the first question, I think, in some ways, not the first, but one of the good questions actually, are you optimizing for reach or revenue? I think really matters. But that's also a question that you can't just ask in isolation, because it also depends on, are you in a brand new market, or are you in a market that's very crowded already? So there are all these kind of like nuances, right? So you have to consider around your price. And then, of course, if you're in a very crowded market, then you have to make a decision. Do you want to be the challenger brand and maybe try to displace somebody? Then maybe you need to be a little cheaper. I'm not saying that's always the case, but sometimes you do, right? Because you want to come in and incentivize that, and maybe over time you can sell them more and upsell and so on. Or are you coming in where there's really not a leading player yet, and you can come in and become the premium vendor? That's another strategy as well. So again, I'm hesitant always to give like the definitive answer, because it depends so much on the situation that your company is in, which is why I think, again, you need somebody like Value Ships to come in and help you guide that, navigate that, and hold a mirror up to you. Because every startup I speak to, oftentimes are like, the CEO is bullish and aggressive. They're like, we're the only one. Nobody can do what we do. I'm like, really? Are you sure? I'm like, there's a lot of other vendors who do what you do, right? Let me show you, and so on. So you have to just be realistic and real about it. And then, of course, you have to marry the value that people get to ultimately what they're buying. I mean, how often will they use it? Is it a product they use every day? Is it something they use every week, every month? What value does it ultimately bring? I'll give you an example. One of the toughest pricing situations I was in was when I was working at Box. I'd gone there after Salesforce, and we were selling an enterprise level file sharing and collaboration platform. On the low end, though, we were competing with Dropbox, and they had much more love in their brand from a consumer perspective, and their brand was much more well known than ours was. And then we were also competing with some very strong free solutions in Google Drive and in Microsoft OneDrive, who's basically giving away Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive away for free as part of a bigger suite. Right? So for Box, we were just selling you we're just selling you basically a storage solution, a file sharing solution, but with security and privacy and all these kind of things. So we had to go really hard on that. We had to make a decision on how do we separate ourselves, right? Because we're competing with a low end, much loved solution or a solution that is free, basically, where you get it. And so it was a tough one because if we price ourselves too low, then you just go with Dropbox, right? Or go with the free version because it's like, what am I really like getting? That doesn't seem like it's that much value. And I'm going to go with the trusted brand or the hot brand, right? That's what. And if you price yourself too high for the enterprise, then you're like, okay, you're just starting to price yourself out of some of these because for some it's like, yes, you get integrations and single sign-on and security and all this kind of stuff, but it's a lot of price to pay for just like basically a storage solution, file sharing solution. So it's a tough one to figure out. I mean, we ended up with a kind of a good, better, best solution with different tiers and different ways of kind of scaling and upgrading and what you'd pay for. The philosophy we always had, and I think now many companies have adopted since, including Zoom and Slack and some of these, is from a user perspective, because we also had a freemium model. From a user perspective, we wanted everyone who came in contact with our product to have a delightful, joyful experience. So they would use it, it would become part of their life, they'd share it with their friends and family and all that stuff. What you ended up paying for is all the back-end stuff. So we would charge a lot of money for that, but we would never charge for just a user experience. And of course, now I think, again, that's also kind of a fairly standard model in some ways. But that's an example where I think when it comes to kind of like price and how it can affect you, because it was a tough one because we had to kind of nail it just right, or else we'd be priced out of both ends of the market. So we were kind of squeezed in the middle a little bit. So you have to decide, right, again, what's right for you. Again, partnering with somebody like Value is absolutely the right thing. Thinking you can do all this alone, maybe, but it's a really tough thing to do because you have to think about so many variables that go into making the price right for you. Of course, married with jobs to be done, their desire to buy, what are the competitors doing, where's it going, all kinds of things, right? But there's a lot of variables. That's why I'm a little hesitant to give it a straight answer, but there's so many things you can do to get closer to what you're looking for.
But I think that what you're saying is about consistency, right? So when I was doing it, guilty, I did a bit of, or maybe proud, I did a bit of a research, and that was like in particular interesting for me, the story behind Box and Dropbox, right? Because like I remember I was using both in and also companies that I was working in was using Box, and I wanted to ask a follow-up question: how hard it was. You already answered it actually, because you have this big love brand that everyone in B2C sector knows, and I think they were quite successful in making it, also within B2C and people within B2C bringing it to their leaders in B2B. But at the same time, thinking about business where compliance is super important, you don't really want to use the tool that is 80% off, right? So which was the story of Dropbox, right? Refer a friend, and instead of 10 gigabytes you'll get 1 giga, like instead of 1 gigabyte you'll get 10 gigabytes. Every friend referred equals 10 gigabytes. At some point I had like 100 gigabytes. It was like 10 years ago, like 100 gigabytes, I could upload my whole PC 50 times, right? And it
Totally.
enough. But it is challenge, right? Because they're like the recognition that they have was quite high, right? So
for sure.
But then I wanted to ask a follow-up question to it, because you were definitely on the higher tier on the market, like focused much more on compliance. Nevertheless, you decided to introduce or have the freemium model. What's your perspective? And it doesn't necessarily have to be around your Box experience, but this is also the question branding wise that I'm receiving a lot. Is about the freemium model and how important it is to have or not to have it. And I will give you a bit of a context here as well from our perspective. What we see on the market, having like more than, I think right now, 8K pricing pages within our database is that companies that do have freemium on average are cheaper than companies that don't have freemium. And of course, comparing industries, the same industries, apples to apples, etc. Uh, and it comes directly from value-based framework, right? So if you give something for free, you are deteriorating the perceived value of your solution. Hence, the willingness to pay is lower. Hence, the execute price is lower. So there is a logic behind this. Nevertheless, I have seen companies with freemium who are exclusive at the same time. So a bit of a conflicting thoughts, conflicting examples here. Hence, I wanted to ask you a question. What's your perspective around brand building versus having freemium, free trial, anything around the word free?
I would say that it is definitely not right for a lot of companies. A lot of companies try it and they end up giving kind of a bastardized version of their product that doesn't satisfy anyone, and it ends up actually hurting their brand, I think, more than anything. So I would definitely hesitate a lot before you venture into the free market. We did it at Box, coming back to that example, because everybody else was doing it. So we felt like we had to have a freemium version. In hindsight, that was not the thing that set us apart. I don't really think it honestly helped us that much in the end. Yeah, it helped us that when we were just starting out in terms of competition. But as we started getting really focused on enterprise, we should probably just kill that freemium, But then of course it's hard because you have a lot of people already on the freemium and so on. I would say to you exactly, I think you kind of hinted at this. It can hurt your brand. It can give an awful experience if not done right. It oftentimes also in many companies ends up being kind of the forgotten thing unless you have dedicated teams focused on maintaining and building a great freemium experience and thinking about growth hacking that into getting that in front of the right people at the right time. And so I would be hesitant. I think there's some products out there which lends itself naturally to freemium. And I think the ones that do so are the ones where you see instant utility from the product, meaning that you use it instantly and you start getting value from it instantly. Signing up for a freemium product that you don't really use very often or might just forget about, that's not really success. It's not success for you as a user or a company, and not really for the company. Yes, the company can now say they have, oh, look, we signed one more up, but if there's not any usage in there, is it really any value at all, right? Because it's just a number on a page. So I think that the secret is there instant utility? Think about, and is there instant virality also is another kind of added component. So let's take Zoom or Slack as two good examples there. Zoom or Slack, you sign up and you can start using it instantly, but only really also if you, of course, invite other people to use it with. So you're never alone. So you're instantly motivated by the nature of their product to start using it with other people. And that ends up providing a lot of utility for you. So you get instant value yourself, but you also start spreading that value to other people very quickly. Yes, there are products where you get instant value just for yourself. I think there's Dropbox is a good example. There is value in you just storing all your stuff in the cloud, of course, right? So you can get to it from any computer and so on. But I would say it's probably a little bit different than a lot of other products that try to claim that they have a freemium. If it's not really clear what the value is. So can it work? Of course it can. We've seen many examples of it working. I would just say, just be cautious before you go down route. It's a tax on the development team, on the marketing team, on how you perceive. There's no free lunch. It's going to impact a lot of what you end up doing. So, but again, you study this a lot. What would you say on this, Chris? What are you seeing?
Well, I would say definitely if there is anyone from Value Ships listening to our PowerPoint slide on freemium, please add instant value as one of the prerequisites for freemium. So that's, I think, learning for all of us. But I agree with you. I mean that, if you can, because many companies are betting on this virality effect, but at the end, I'm not a big fan of referring to, OpenAI, even, Salesforce, etc., because those are examples that those are outliers, right? And we
Yeah.
all want to be like Netflix, Apple, or OpenAI, while I really wish all of you that you will get there, and I truly believe it is possible. but the road and taking the learnings from those companies might be quite challenging. I totally agree that freemium is not a free lunch, and it
Mhm.
can be good for you, but
Mhm.
value is one thing, but you need to be aware of the second or other side of the coin. And the other
Mhm.
side of the coin is that willingness to pay for your product can be lower. And if you're introducing premium, make sure that your KPIs that you are tracking follow, right? So your
Mhm.
main KPI is not conversion anymore; it's
Mhm.
free to paid.
Yeah, we see that.
So
I mean, we see this in an extreme version in consumer space, right? Think about how many apps you download on your phone that are free, and then when they try to upgrade you, you never do because you're like, I get enough value for. So to your point around it erodes the value of the paid product. I think that it's much more pronounced in consumer, I think, than it is in enterprise, but it probably is as well in enterprise for sure.
and there is also like within B2C, because we're also working like not mostly, but from time to time we're working with B2C companies, and it's such a rabbit hole, because you start
Mhm.
monetizing much more through ads, so the experience is
Mhm.
even worse. But you can delete the ads by subscribing to paid version, but you're already mad at the tool that there have been so many ads. So like it's a real rabbit hole. But we'll open up the questions from the audience in like 4 to 5 minutes. But before we go there, I would
Mhm.
like to see or also get your perspective on the other side of the spectrum, which
Mhm.
is enterprise level pricing or hidden pricing. So currently,
Mhm.
what we see on the market, there is a big wave of the pricing transparency. There are tools like Vendor, for example, who are
Mhm.
supporting the decision makers in like getting a quote without going to the pricing pages.
Mhm.
Also, we see this within chat GPT. You can just ask a question: how much is X,
Mhm.
Y, Z, and you'll get the answer. You don't know if the answer is correct, but you'll get
Mhm.
some quote there.
Yeah.
So do you think that we're moving into the era of pricing transparency? And why I'm asking you in
Mhm.
particular this question is the you buyer journey that I've just mentioned a minute ago, right? Imagine that you're going to Vendor or OpenAI, ask for a question like price of Salesforce, for example. You get the quote of 50K, and then you go into the call and you get the quote of 100K. There is it must be not the best experience, I would say. So it also harms your brand. So do you think that we're moving into the era, sorry for repeating myself, but do you think we're moving into the era of pricing transparency, and how important it is for brands?
I think we have been for the last 10 years, and I think we continue to see that trend, and it's a trend I'm all for. I love transparency around pricing, but there's an asterisk with it, and the asterisk is that you also don't want to make it too complicated for the buyer to understand. When you go to a pricing page, if there's too many options and it just becomes too confusing, then I think it can overwhelm the buyer, and that can lead to no decision or them going with something that seems a little bit simpler. So, yes, in terms of like being very clear on mostly what you're going to pay, 100%. I think the trend has been going that way for a while. But then, of course, there is a lot of nuance to like some add-ons, usage-based fees, and so on, depending on what you're selling. But in terms of like not surprising the customer, absolutely, I think that's one of the worst experiences. I mean, one of the things when I was again at Salesforce, and I've also now experienced on the other side of being a Salesforce customer and so on, is when you sign up for your per user per month license, great, and then suddenly you get hit with you're using too much data, you have to pay more, like what, or you have too many accounts, too many records, like what are you talking about, right? So all these like hidden fees I'm not a fan of, because it just erodes the trust a little bit and your love of the brand as they come up. But I also get that that's hard to like list all those different things on a website, again, because you're trying to optimize for simplicity. So there's a difference in if it's a one-to-one communication, transparency, of course. If it's one to many, which the website really is, you have to kind of optimize, I think, for simplicity. If your product has a gazillion different options, which many of the enterprise products do have, then you have to optimize for the simplest version of that, I think. So yes, so it's a long way of saying yes. I think that the era of transparency is here. It has been here for a while, and it's going to continue to be here because that's what customers want. They can find it themselves if you're not transparent, but there are just some nuances to it. So yeah, one to many, absolutely. One-to-one, go a little bit deeper, because you don't want to have surprises when the order comes or the invoice comes and so on.
Yeah, especially that, we're also moving into the usage-based pricing era as
Yeah,
well, right? So
yeah,
you really
yeah,
want to be, and it needs, like, your pricing needs to be auditable for your buyers, right? They need to be aware how much they are spending within the tool, because if you
totally.
hit them with, like, 10K instead of 1K bill at the end of the month, they might be a bit angry, to put it
Well, this
nicely.
is another interesting nuance around per user per month, annual contracts, usage-based pricing. Again, there are pros and cons to each of them. I mean, I've dealt with all of them in various capacities. Usage-based pricing is very powerful and can be beneficial both to the company and also there certainly to the customer, but it can also be a black box and confusing if not done right. So and then of course per user pricing is simple, but then it's also easy to find out if some people are not using it or need more. Then it's the scalability becomes a little bit of an issue. So anyway, that's another great nuance probably to dive into at some other point. You probably
So
have you have a lot of thoughts on that. Yeah.
I have two more questions, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. That there will be brief, I promise. The first question is around, we said usage, but there is also a new kit on the block, and this kit is quite cool, which is output or outcome based pricing.
Mhm.
So my perspective, it's not for the others, but I see especially young like early stage founders trying to leverage this model, because it seems that it will make everything for my brand. You don't get the success, you're not paying, so it gives us turbo
Mhm.
credibility. What they don't see is that some people need to invest the time in the relationship, so it's not only
Yes, yes.
money that is a currency here. But do you
Mhm.
think that it will really push the needle or put product ecosystem on the different track using the output based pricing or even outcome success based? What do you think? This is like the real big change, or?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm in the early days of working with a company that does the same thing for some things that we're looking at. And I'm a big fan, honestly, I am. But it's too early for me to tell whether or not it's really going to last or if it's going to be ultimately successful and stick. But in theory, yes, I love the idea of you pay for the success of something, the outcome of something. So absolutely, or you pay a sliding scale depending on where it lands. So yes, so philosophically, I'm very aligned. But I think it's early days. I don't know if you have different thoughts, but I'm like, yeah, I'm excited about this. It's another way of reinventing the business model or the pricing model to something new.
Mhm. And I can't agree. I can't disagree here, right?
Yeah.
Like outcome is the creme de la creme of
Mhm.
value based pricing. So of course, but I like to ask this question because I find myself a bit biased. So that is why. Okay, so the last one for today from my side. This is around pricing to current customers, and why I think it's also important
Mhm.
from the marketing perspective in general is that some people decided to trust in your brand. They already love your brand, but there is a price increase coming but you increase the value, and some companies might not afford it, some companies
Mhm.
might not have it in the budget, etc. So I think, of course, for some it can be easy. You would just pay more, we see the value. But how do you go around these hard situations, right? When you must increase the price, but just some companies can't longer take it, but they were big supporters from the very beginning, etc., etc. So how do you go around those situations, or uh, are they really existing? Maybe that should be
Yeah.
the first
I mean, you
question.
have to. First of all, you have to do it. Inflation is a real thing, and cost of doing business is a real thing. So you have to do it. The way you do it matters, right? So it's about storytelling. It's about positioning. It's about making sure that people understand the value that you've added in the last couple of years. I bet if you ask most customers of any company, do you know the 100 features that were added to the product in the last year? Most companies will probably go, no, I don't know. So it's about storytelling and being able to tell the customer about what's been added. So that's so storytelling, positioning, the relationship matters. But to your point, what if you get to a situation where the company just can't afford to be on this journey anymore with you? What do you do? That's a really tough one. I mean, you basically have two choices. I think you can either try to be compassionate to their situation and maybe grandfather them in somehow, or you say, go use something else. That's a choice only you can make, because there is a cost of doing business, of course, as well, that you have to take into account. It's a hard one to answer. I'm much more on the side of let's figure out a way to support our customers who's been with us for a long time. But
Mhm.
I can understand the side that would say you can't have too many of them, because that could sink the business as well if everyone stays grandfathered into an old program or an old price and so on.
Yeah, so it is. Sometimes it's a said bye bye, of course,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
sometimes it might be let's try to find a way, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
for example, like downsizing,
Hmm.
etc. Okay, so
That's.
we have one question from the audience, or a couple of
Hmm.
questions. So, what about and thank you very much for them. So pricing mistake impact versus brand reputation. Have you seen those, right? So I don't know, companies like I did some terribly wrong in terms of pricing and they suffered. Any points around this one or
The one
examples?
that, yeah, the one that comes to mind was really. I remember there was a case around Google a few years ago with their Google Maps pricing around their API, and a lot of companies rely on Google Maps for their business, right? Because it's integrated into their apps and so on. And suddenly they hike their price a crazy amount, like 1,000% or whatever it was. I can't quite remember. And just like developers and companies who were relying on this were totally shocked. It's not what do they do? Do they absorb the cost, or do they add it on to their customers, right? And a lot of, I think, remember there was an outrage in the developer community around like just screwing, like suddenly Google couldn't be trusted anymore. They don't have our back, for a company that's always been like promising to not be evil and so on. Suddenly that really backfired on them. And I think a lot of it comes down to storytelling, communication, not giving people a heads up, not being clear around it, right? Lots of reasons probably why when you analyze this, but it was just like the way it came out was Google is evil and they're screwing us, right? Right. So that is kind of the headline that was in the paper, and that's not the headline that you want to see at all.
This is what I've
I
heard
mean,
recently, how come, like, Google from being cool became evil, and Microsoft went, fully opposite way, right? Which was,
that's right.
which
That's right.
is funny. The comment that I got on one of the conferences, and it directly plugs into the second question that we're having. So, any, vice versa, any cool case studies of storytelling around pricing communication? Are you a fan of any?
I'm a fan of how Slack has traditionally done it. I'm not as up to speed on what they've done in the last kind of 2 year or two, but they used to be so great at communicating. Like if you did an update in your app on your phone or on their website, like just the value of what you would get become a part of. It wasn't just about the features, but it was much more around the community you would build, the way that it would enhance your life, and so on. I just love that storytelling becomes such a key part of how they thought about differentiating themselves and the value. So it didn't become a conversation about price or per user per month or something. It became much more of an interesting case study around that. I think we've seen that. I think we've seen others as well. I think Airbnb is a good example of a company that they don't really use price directly as a lever, but they use it as a way of saying, there's a fee, a tax that you pay for being part of a trusted ecosystem where you get a delightful experience. So they, of course, many companies don't come up outright and say this is a pricing thing, but it really is. So for think about before Airbnb became a thing, uh, could you rent a private place somewhere from somebody? Absolutely, you could. Was it a great experience? No, it was a shitty experience. Like, can I trust this person? How do I transfer money to them? The pictures are kind of shady, all this kind of stuff.
And then you've
Airbnb
seen
come,
the thriller movie a day before,
yeah,
and then you're going like shaky to the apartment, and you're like,
yeah,
ah.
exactly, exactly. And then Airbnb comes along and goes like, we're going to create this trusted ecosystem where the renter wins, the rentee wins, and we're going to be in the middle and take a price for it, a fee for it, right? But we're going to be the trusted solution in the middle that's going to verify that you're going to get a great experience, the price is right, that it looks great, and all this kind of stuff. And they've created a whole empire based on that. But price is absolutely a key part of how they've done it. They don't use the word price, but it's part of their storytelling.
And I think, last comment here is that, both branding and pricing is a learning journey. And I think, you're doing also something cool around fostering the learning culture. So maybe you can shed a bit of light what Zensai is doing and, how you're succeeding in fostering the learning culture.
Absolutely. We want to be basically the company that is on the side of people becoming the best that they can be every single day. We want to be the company that gives people the motivation, skills, and knowledge to be successful every day. When we look at all the data out there that says that people are really unhappy in their work, it usually comes down to the fact that they feel stuck or not supported. We want to be the platform that gets companies to really invest in their people and see tangible outcomes from that investment: better productivity, better revenue growth, better profitability, better outcomes for the business in general. But it comes from one North Star, which is about giving companies the platform so they can truly invest in their people to be successful every single day.
And we believe also in value ships that, coachability and learning journeys are the most important journeys in your career. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Thank you for the talk.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who has joined. I highly, highly, highly recommend following Robin on LinkedIn. Amazing content, and one of the talks that I was really waiting for. So Robin, thank you very much again. Highly recommend
Thanks, Chris.
Zensai as well, and see you on the road.
See you. All right. See you, Chris. Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye.